So hello everybody, welcome to this new SPNHC ICOM NATHIST 2020 virtual conference. This is session 2B entitled Anthropocene in the Natural History Museum. And I am your moderator. My name is Nicholas Kramer, chair of the Anthropocene working group of the NATHIST ICOM, and my helper is Dorit Volenitz. She is president of the NATHIST ICOM. This session is I don't know, I don't want to say it's a bit special, but it is also related to this Anthropocene working group of the NATHIST. And maybe I would just say a few words about this concept very briefly. And because for us, Anthropocene is a concept that is more and more used in different kind of cultural production and of course, different kind of museums. For the Museum of Natural History, this concept offers very interesting perspective for collection and exhibitions, mainly because by crossing the historical times and the geological times, this concept offers both a large overview of the current deep environmental changes. I mean, for instance, that's not only the climate change, but also we have also other topics like biodiversity loss, for instance. And it is also a fruitful opportunity to combine knowledge coming from Earth system sciences and humanities. So I'm very pleased to welcome all our speakers today, because I'm sure they will tackle all this kind of aspect of this concept. So this session will be recorded for later viewing. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to all the speakers in this session. Each presenter will present for 10 minutes, then will be 5 minutes of question, and at the end of each presentation, and time we need time for transition between presenters. Please ask questions, that's very important, of the speakers by using the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen, and this will be asked of the presenters by the moderators or helper in the order they are received. The chat function has been made available for technical questions or for conversing with other attendees. Please use this judiciously, as any inappropriate use of the chat may result in your being removed from the session or the chat function being disabled. Please bear with any difficulty we may have. Enjoy the session. So we will start immediately with Massimo Bernardi from Trento Museum, and I will give you Massimo the talk.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Thanks, Nicholas, and everyone. So, as introduced, yes, I'm speaking from northern Italy, from Trento. It's a small town in the Dolomites area. And here, I hope now you will be able to see my presentation. At the able, I'm not able to see it, so maybe I can wait a second. But in the meantime, I can introduce you to the context of what I'm going to say. So we decided to entitle this presentation a multifaceted museological commitment to the Anthropocene, Busillis, so the problem of the Anthropocene, and here it is. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing my presentation. So this title has in itself this word museological commitment. In that I will try to give you a brief overview of how much our whole museum and so our activities were shaped or are nowadays shaped by this necessary question approach Busillis to the Anthropocene that we mainly read through the metaphor of the planetary boundaries a few years ago of Johan Rockström, and now by using the SDGs of the United Nations framework. I will come to that in a second, but just to highlight that I'm going to give you this presentation in the name of many colleagues who are working on these topics, and then at the very end I will give you my personal approach to this topic that I hope can be of interest or a kind of a ground on which we can meet and maybe collaborate together. So thanks for the second slide, in which I will just give you a few words about the museum. So although I work in a museum that was created 2 centuries ago, more or less, we had the opportunity to move into a new building since 2013. And so in this new building, we had the opportunity to reshape our exhibitions, and therefore to incorporate also this approach that it's kind of a new, so to the Anthropocene and the SDGs and so on. If you can move to the next slide, please. We tried to do that by incorporating very much this relationship between nature, science, and society. And this obviously is spread throughout the whole museum. But if we go to the next slide, in particular, we had a section in the museum that is dedicated to sustainability. And we read this in 2013, or actually the years before, when we were planning this exhibition, so this permanent exhibition, through the metaphor of the planetary boundaries. So that was the best available description of the relationship between man and environment in 2012 or 2011. So those from the school of Johan Rockström. And here we try not only obviously to showcase objects, but also to speak about this immaterial, very delicate aspect of the relationship between man and environment. We try to do that in a floor of our museum, in which we connect the relationship between man and environment in the past. So we have all this traditional, let's say, part on the prehistory and archaeology of the region where the museum is placed, and that we connect to this part that you see in the screen now, that deals more with the relationship, so the difficulties in the relationship between man and environment today. So if we can move to the next slide, we obviously do that not only with our exhibitions, but only with the classical activities that one can do inside a museum. So all the events that can take place like this one, by using theater, the museum as a theater in which speak about these topics. But if we go to the next slide, maybe the turning point was in 2016, when I was the main curator of this exhibition, Extinctions, A Story of Catastrophe and Other Opportunities, in which we jumped very much from a very classical, let's say, approach of a natural history museum describing the past extinctions, and so the relationship between all the other organisms to the environment. Next slide, please. That we did with several different approaches as in a common classical exhibition. Next slide, please. But then we moved very much to the topic of the 6th mass extinction and the Anthropocene. We did that also from the political side and the sociological sides, that are maybe the directions to which we are trying to go, so to tackle also these aspects. If we go to the next slide, we use the very end of this exhibition to introduce the topic of the SDGs that at the time were just being published by or promoted by the United Nations. And so this became a kind of a roadmap for our activities in the museum. If we go to the next slide, the SDGs were incorporated in a number of different educational activities, both for the scholastics, so for schools, but also for in lifelong learning programs. If we go to the next slide, we also tried to use the metaphor of the SDGs, and so to promote this approach to the very difficult issue of our relationship with not only the environment, but also with the all complex sociological, economical, and political issues that are inside the SDGs framework, also outside the museum. So all these pictures that you are seeing is that these are activities that have been performed outside the museum, so with the traveling exhibitions, inside shopping centers, inside libraries, and so on. In the next slide, you see that we also tried to have very tight connection with the political management of our region. So the administration of our region, that it's an autonomous region in Italy, that it's called the Trentino Alto Adige Südtirol. And in this, we were able to run a kind of advocacy, to push very much in the advocacy, and to run a program with the administration, with the political administration of our region, that ended with that was shaped in a participatory program that we were able to then translate in a document that it's called the Local Strategy of Sustainable Development. That this is therefore a document that was handled and produced by us as a museum, but as a kind of collector of all the inputs that we were able to collect, to gain from the population, so from citizens. And we handled this document to the policymakers in order to translate the requests, the feeling of the people translated in this document to the politicians to be put in action, let's say. And so in the next slide, you see what we did. So we tried to analyze what had been already done in the framework of the Agenda 2030 in our province, how we can better communicate the agenda, and then how best we can deal with the growth in awareness about these topics in the region. So in the next slide, maybe we can jump. I'm a little bit late, so we can go to the next one. You see that we also had a number of events inside the museum to have all our staff, so from technicians to researchers, from curators to architects, all aware. Thanks, coming of this project that is becoming more and more important in our mission, and therefore there was these activities inside the museum for the staff, for the internals, in which we tried to have everybody involved in these activities. If we go to the next slide, you see just the culmination, the end of a project that we did, in which all the stuff that you see to the right was part of this complex how to say, translation of the SDGs into our own activities, everyday activities, into the museum. In the next slide, you see also the formal component, so our corporate social responsibility report that was read through the framework, the lens of the SDGs. And in the next slide, this was also translated in a contribution of our museum to this document that you may probably know, published by ICOM and OECD, about the local development and the contribution of museums. And in this document, we contributed in the part related to the application, let's say, of the SDGs metaphor in the everyday life of a museum. If we go to the next slide, we are going to the end of my presentation. I'm trying to now give you an idea of what we are trying, and I'm presenting this presentation just because I am the head of this project. What we are trying to do now is to go, let's say, beyond the SDGs. So going beyond this metaphor and trying to go as much as possible to the limits to the borders of what a natural history museum has classically done. So talking about the relationship between organism and environment, and trying to bring these in a more complex dialogue between us, so between the museum and the citizens, or better, between the citizens and us, about how we feel in the Anthropocene. So this is a brand new project that I am building together with colleagues, and I will be very much happy to exchange thoughts or have contribution from anyone who is interested in trying to use the museum as a collector of feelings about the very strange times we are living. So the Anthropocene, as you see in this slide, I have kind of categorized from feelings like that relates to trust, to hope, to empathy, but also to fear, to hungry feelings that are associated to the concept of the Anthropocene. And I think it's can be a good metaphor to collect feelings, collect impressions from our visitors, and translate those in a way that we then can have a kind of a description of how man is living, is feeling in the Anthropocene. In the next slide, you see that now we have been forced, obviously, to change our plans given the pandemic, and so we are now experimenting a laboratory on these topics outside the museum in a setting that should become a kind of urban laboratory in which we can talk with people about this topic. And in the very last slide, the next one, I'm just proposing to our chair and all together to see if in some way the topics that we are going to discuss today and in general in the Anthropocene working group can or are probably overlapping with some that the sustainability working group of ICOM is discussing, and then maybe joining the forces in some of these discussions can be a proposal, can be an idea to move forward together in trying to understand and tackle better these strange times called Anthropocene. Next slide is the end, and I thank you very much for your attention, and thanks again to the chair for having proposed this session.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Yes, we can see with your presentation that the Anthropocene is the backbone of your museum. That was very, very interesting. And you end with a question. We won't maybe answer immediately, but we open the discussion. Any question? Maybe you can read the question. You can.
I will.
Me and the environment. Have women no impact on the environment? It's a kind of gender question.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing only a part of the question, I guess. So most of what I'm seeing is hellos and
no, not the you have to go to the Q&A.
The Q&A, sorry. Okay, now I'm here. Men and the environment. Have women no impact on the environment? Yes, it's obviously a gender question. I have obviously no, to me, man, it's Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens, there is no men with beard and no woman without. That doesn't make any difference. It's then why not say Homo sapiens? Okay, it's just humanity in general. Okay, it's a good point, often raised. I think it really doesn't make much difference, but this is a personal point of view, and I hope that we can. It does. Okay.
If I may add, it's a key point, because of course there is this question, but also the question of humanity. If there only a single humanity, and of course from our point of view as naturalists, we can consider, and you use this term, Homo sapiens. But in terms of societies and humanities, we can say there is a single humanity, and that's probably something that we could maybe say more about this.
Yeah, and maybe probably at the very beginning, it depends when you mark the beginning of the Anthropocene, but it may also be that there have been other species that have contributed, human species that have contributed to these strange times we are living in, quite far in the past, maybe 40 or 30 or 50,000 years ago, but we were not alone, so maybe we are not the only one to take into consideration when we deal between the relationship between humanities and environment. So yes, and sorry if I have offended anyone. My use of men was that of humanity in general. So thanks, Martin, for having pointed out this.
Okay, thank you, Massimo. We'll go on with the next presentation. Excuse me, just have to stop your video. And the next speaker is Ludovic. Just start your video, Ludovic, and mute. Okay. Okay, the next speaker is Ludovic Maggioni from the Musée de Neuchâtel in Switzerland, with the title Pôles, Feu la Glace, How to Deal with the Anthropocene. So Ludovic, you can go on. I will just...
Okay. Is it okay with the presentation?
I have some trouble to share my screen.
Okay.
Andy, can you help me?
So I can begin. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Nicola, for the invitation. Okay, it's okay. Okay. Thank you very much. So I try to talk about an experience that we try here in Neuchâtel with an exhibition called Pôles, Feu la Glace. It means to talk about the polar region and the ice, the disparition of the ice. So can we go to the next slide? Just few words, because I think nobody knows where is Neuchâtel. Neuchâtel it's in Switzerland. It's not far away from Geneva. People know more. Geneva, 1 hour. And it's a small city, 40,000 people living there. Next slide, please. So here you can see the museum. This museum was created in 1835 in another building, and in the 80s he arrived in this building that was not a museum at the beginning. It was a school, so we try to modify things to make a good museum inside this place. Next slide, please. So just in few words, I try to describe the philosophy of the museum of how we can imagine the guideline of this museum. The idea is for us to try to generate interest and also discuss complex issues and also improve critical thinking and try to show people how in a museum we can live together. And the idea is to focus on Anthropocene and just to use this purpose to try to experiment things in a cultural way in the museum. Next slide. So I try to talk to you about this experience, this exhibition was presented here during 1 year and 1 year ago. Next, and I don't know if it's going to work, but there's a small video that show you some pictures of this exhibition. Okay, so
réfuté. Et aujourd'hui, vous ne pouvez plus réfuter le fait que notre climat se modifie.
Notre folie consommatrice est en train d'affecter, et sur le très long cours, l'ensemble du système Terre. Et ça ne s'est jamais produit, et c'est en train de se produire.
Oh, ça me paraît tellement lointain que je ne me sens pas concernée.
Aujourd'hui, c'est à nous de jouer.
Yes, it works. Thank you very much. So next slide. So as you can see with this image, we are in really several things in this exhibition with a real cultural approach. And just to try to make a resume, there's three main guidelines that was very important for us when we work on this exhibition. The first was do not enter in the debate of the experts about this question of Anthropocene. Don't go in the geological issue and things like that, but more talk with the social issues with this topic. The other one was we thought that if we make an exhibition called Anthropocene or climate change or something like that, people won't come in the museum because we speak of this every time on the radio, on the TV. So the idea is more to try to attract people with another topic. And here the polar region are very interesting for a lot of people. Polar bears, penguins are charismatic animals and make people dream. So it's another way to try to show people this Anthropocene topic. And the other one was try to develop a cultural way of talking of that with a lot of storytelling and try to make this big story going on. Next slide. So what is the place of science in this exhibition? Here we have the chance that there's a lot of laboratory working on this topic here in Switzerland and in France. And we can show to the people the tools used by the scientists to make the study on the gas on the ice core. So on this picture, you can see the machine, the big tool, and on the right, ice core coming from Antarctica. A laboratory give us an ice core. What is very important is with that to talk of the fact and to show people science, people who are doing things in reality. So this is one way of doing things. And next slide. The other one with the storytelling is more to talk with the fiction. And here you can see on your left, a death announcement. It's a fake one. This tell to the humanity that during the Anthropocene, the ice disappear of the Earth, and it was totally fake and just to make the fiction and to try to touch people. But what is very amazing is that recently in Switzerland, a glacier disappeared, and there was a real funeral organized for this disparition. So it's amazing to see how when the fiction become a kind of reality. Next slide, please. And maybe like in Trento, what is also very important for us is to talk about the social issue and to try to see how people can interact and can talk with the museum. It's why the last room of the exhibition was a presentation of testimonials. Can we have the other side of the slide, please? So the idea of this room was to, before the exhibition, send a message to some people that we choose and ask them what they feel about the disparition of the ice in the polar region. And they have to send us a testimonial with their feeling. It can be a drawing, a writing, a movie, what they want. Can we have the other one? And you can see here, there's some people that answer us. So there's child, there's politician, there's people living expedition, polar expeditor, polar people who go in this place, biologists, people who are now old and try to make a mix of what the society can think about this topic. Can we change? So at the end, we collect near 70 testimonials, and we edit a book with all these testimonials. So these testimonials was in the exhibition, and people can go away also with the book. Here, the idea is to show people that scientific work is very important, but what you think is also very important. So this book is not scientific work, but it's also very important that people can go away from the exhibition with the experience of the other people, that think about this issue in the world. Can we change? So this is what we try to do with this exhibition, and it was a great, there was a lot of people who leave us word and tell us that it's very important to talk of this kind of things by mixing reality, fiction, and try to always saying that there's something not normal that is happening now on the earth. And we try now to rebuild this experience with another topic. The next exhibition that will open in November of this year in Neuchâtel is dealing with wild nature, and we are going to try to explore humans and animals relationships, and try to talk with this topic also of the biodiversity loss, and not to talk directly with that, like with Pôles, but try to find another way to show so nice lions, so nice, very wild animals, and try to discuss, but at the end, wild, what it means, is it the same meaning everywhere in the world? What are the differences, and what is nature? Try to also discuss this question, and to show people that the definition of the world are also very important, because with this definition, you don't see the world in the same way. So it's what we are working on now. And next slide, I think it's finished. Thank you very much. And if you have question, I can answer.
Thank you very much, Ludovic. I think for the moment there is no question. I have one, a hard one for you, Ludovic. I'm sorry. It's a question we all face when in Natural History Museum we use the concept of the Anthropocene, because in your presentation you talk about scientific facts, but at the same time someone we are said that the Anthropocene is not an official terms in terms of geological stratigraphy. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, it's what I try to explain before is that we don't consider that the scientific definition with the geological committee, etc., was the important point for this exhibition. The important point for us was that this word appear in the society and try to tell something, and we more try to explain what this word mean for the society. And the idea with these testimonials was also that. What is the representation of the society of this thing? Okay,
Ludovic, there is one question, maybe you can read it by yourself on the Q&A. Yeah. There is one, if you push the Q&A button, yeah. What ideas for the new wild exhibit do you have like the idea of using the ice core and equipment live? It's I'll let you answer.
You have like the idea of using? Oh yeah, showing science in direct with this topic of why. For the moment, really, I don't know. Here we are more working with a man who went in Africa and try to show that wild landscape, wild animals don't really exist with the humans, and we realized a movie that show animals in their landscape, and after the camera go out and you see that there's human everywhere, and you see that this is totally it's totally fake, this idea. So this is one idea, but it's not necessarily in a scientific way.
Okay, thank you very much, Ludovic. We will now go on with Bergsveinn Thorsson. I have to turn on the video from Thorsson. And Thorsson, okay, can you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Just excuse me. Okay, Andy, I wanted to try by myself, but if you can go on, okay, it's okay for me. So Bergsveinn Thorsson is from the University of Oslo, and your presentation is situated in Anthropocene.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this really interesting symposium. My presentation is based on my doctoral research that I recently completed at the University of Oslo. In my research, I was looking at how museums are engaging with environmental issues with a specific focus on how museums are mobilizing the Anthropocene as a framework. In my analysis, I drew inspiration from assemblage theory, which was developed by Manuel de Landa as a tool for social analysis, a tool to grasp social complexity and analyze diverse types of social entities and how they are constructed by heterogeneous elements. This theory has been picked up by museologists and heritage theorists, most notably by Sharon MacDonald, to emphasize the ongoing reassembling and deassembling processes of making heritage. So I found it quite fitting to adapt this theoretical approach to the construction of the Anthropocene in a museum context. Next slide, please. So as we also seen in the presentations before me, the concept has appeared in different types of museums, and I'm going to look at tell you a little bit about the cases I studied. Next slide. So by looking at the Anthropocene as an assemblage, I analyzed specific cases, and I presented analysis on 3 different scales of museum work, where I examined museum objects and how they materialize the Anthropocene. I examined an exhibition on the concept, and then, last but not least, I looked at how a museum assembles the concept as a major theme for the whole institution. As has been previously mentioned, the Anthropocene is originally a geological concept, but since the work on making it an official part of the geological timescale started, the discourse has spread across many disciplines and is being deliberated by social scientists, people from the humanities, the cultural sector, and the arts. The concept has been embraced in holistic terms, maybe even more enthusiastically than in chronostratigraphical terms. So it is safe to say that the concept takes many different forms and shapes within the discourse, and it sometimes feels quite unclear what is assumed when different people or institutions use it. So in order to understand it better, I wanted to challenge the assumption that museums simply just apply theoretical frameworks to their own practices. And as has clearly been displayed in the presentations before me as well. So the process of assembling the Anthropocene in museums is really more like a complex web of relations between people, diverse expertise, practices, objects, and ideas. Next slide. So I wanted to start by talking about museum objects, and this museum object in particular, plastic agglomerate. Plastic agglomerate is a multi-composite material made hard by agglutination of rock and molten plastic. It has been presented as the first rock type composed partially of plastic material that has potentials to act as a global marker for the Anthropocene. The plastic agglomerate materializes the fact that anthropogenic waste doesn't just disappear, it quite literally merges with the environment and slowly but surely becomes embedded in the sediment records. This specific object belongs to the Museum, a museum of science and culture in The Hague, Netherlands. The museum collected this specimen of plastic agglomerate from Camilo Beach in Hawaii in connection to the making of their permanent exhibition on Planet. The exhibition focuses on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, with sections in the exhibition space devoted to each of the goals. In between the sections, there are display cases, and the display you see here on the picture is one of those, where the plastic agglomerate is located. The presentation of the plastic agglomerate is not directly connected to the SDGs, but rather it connects with other rock specimens in a display case representing the geological timescale, signifying the immense timescale of deep time, with the most recent addition being connected to human activity. Next slide, please. The exhibition, Welcome to the Anthropocene, The Earth in Our Hands, that was on display at the Deutsches Museum in Munich, Germany, opened in 2014. The exhibition materialized the concept in more diverse ways as it presented different versions of the concept simultaneously. In one section of the exhibition, they presented a history of the Anthropocene, tracing its origin to the Industrial Revolution, a specific history told through milestones of technological advancements, with the added emphasis on environmental impact. But in another part of the exhibition, they abandoned the linear story of the concept and embraced a more spatial representational strategy. In these photographs, you can see glimpses of the so-called tectonic plates, 6 platforms spread around the exhibition space. Differing from the historical approach, visitors could walk from one platform to the other in no particular order, explore and experience a variety of topics and concerns of the present and future condition of the planet through diverse objects, artworks, and displays. The spatial exploration highlighted a distinctive character of exhibition spaces, the visitors' performative encounter with diverse media and material. The design and layout of the platforms emphasized an exploratory approach to the Anthropocene. So instead of presenting a single narrative, the display design enabled exploration of the world's current and future situation. This version of the Anthropocene is, well, for me, connects quite closely to what anthropologist Anna Tsing has referred to as the promising contradictions of the geological epoch. She argues that engaging with the concept provides the opportunity to explore the multiplicity of temporalities and the ongoing becoming of human and non-human entanglements. More scholars have as well suggested that the practice of noticing the world around us enables exploration of the world's current situation of rapid changes and uncertain future. The exhibition was a result of a collaboration between the museum and the Rachel Carson Center of Environment and Society. The process of making the exhibition was heavily influenced and by discussions within the environmental humanities and the excitement around the concepts innovative potential to rethink the human-environment relationship. Still, as a museum of science and technology, the exhibition emphasized heavily the technological aspect of this proposed geological epoch. So as you can see here, process of assembling the Anthropocene in a museum is not only a question of finding objects that fit to a specific narrative or an idea. It is a complex set of diverse actors, from people to museum objects, artworks, constructed displays, and ideas. Next slide, please. So here you can see the layout of the exhibition, and the tectonic plates I just discussed are the 6 platforms that covered about 2/3 of the exhibition space. Next slide. So broadening the scope of analysis even further, I want to turn your attention to the Carnegie Museum of Natural History and the process of assembling the Anthropocene as a flagship concept for the whole museum. I visited the museum in August 2018, as I was interested in seeing how the museum brought together different elements of museum work to create this flagship concept. With a great help from Nicole Heller, I was able to roam around the museum, the exhibitions, storage spaces, and office spaces. Meet with people who work at the museum and work in collaboration with the museum, and even participate in a mask making workshop. I found that the concept emerged as a situated, open, and flexible framework, holding together diverse elements that engage with questions about the interconnectedness of nature and culture and human impact on the planet. This assemblage at the Carnegie Museum involved different actors, like, for example, the Center for Post-Natural History, an artist-led museum in Pittsburgh that has collected stories and objects about the post-natural, which is the intentional alteration of organisms by humans. It also connected to a climate communication project the educational department had worked on, the Climate and Urban System Partnerships, which aimed at strengthening conversations about climate change through participation and local system understanding. It involved a research project in botany, where the museum's herbarium is revisiting local sites, comparing specimens collected today with specimens collected 100 years ago. It connected diverse thoughts from biologists, exhibition makers, museum educators, geologists, artists, objects, policy documents, and etc. in the assemblage process. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, I'm sorry. So through my analysis, I found out that there is a sort of a reciprocal relationship between thinking and doing in these processes of assembling the Anthropocene, and that the concept is a very flexible framework that can sort of be explained through the diverse discussion or the discourse that revolves around the concept. I also found that the more diverse resources museums invest in assembling the Anthropocene, the more nuanced the assemblage becomes. The Anthropocene has rightly been criticized for foregrounding human impact as a species act, ignoring the complex structural and cultural power relations that lie behind the disproportionate contribution to the global environmental crisis. Grasping the complex implications of climate change, the effects of human impact, can take museums in different directions. Connecting the diverse elements of different expertise from researchers, educators, and curators, museum practices of collection management and display design, objects and ideas, community engagement involving the local population, minority groups, can lead to innovative assemblages that challenge traditional assumptions and open up for fruitful dialogues about the complexity of life in the Anthropocene. Yes, thank you. I think I'm done.
Thank you very much, That's very interesting because you said that the Anthropocene is as a flagship concept for museum, and today we have many examples, and it is also the case for my museum in Sion, and it was the same in Neuchâtel, in Trento, at the Carnegie, and many other museums. But as you said, it's flexible, and a key point of the Anthropocene, and the other speakers also talk about this, that this is the humanist side in terms of knowledge. And what would you propose for museums who are not, who have not in their teams people, you know, who have learned humanities to develop this kind of product? Because, for instance, for the moment, I collaborate with the Museum of Basel in Switzerland, and they are developing a new exhibition in the Anthropocene. And for them, it's in a sense difficult to go on this way because there are no scientists able to deal with it. What do you think of this?
Well, I think sort of the question, I think, lies in collaboration. Really, that you should involve people from different disciplines. You should also involve, you know, communities, and not only the museum's visitors, but you know, the local community, and just try to get as a diverse sort of, you know, perspectives on this concept, or on, you know, we talked about, you know, feelings in the Anthropocene, and I think that's a very, very important thing to explore as well. And I kind of agree that, you know, the whole kind of scientific debate around the concept is not necessarily sort of, you know, an important discussion for, you know, for museums to actually, you know, focus on. Because I think this, I mean, for me, sort of coming from the humanities, I find it very problematic to actually talk about, you know, human impact in general, because it leaves out so many different questions about, you know, how different societies, how different nations have actually contributed a lot more. And then you have, you know, people who have contributed the least are actually, you know, suffering the most from the consequences of this human impact. So discussing it as a species act, or, you know, humanity in general, I think it you know, barely scratches the surface, and we need to go a lot deeper. We need to think about, you know, also, you know, the legacy of colonialism for museums as well, and you know, there are many difficult questions that we need to, you know, engage with, and I think the sooner we start that, the better. You know, we can sort of move the conversation further.
Thank you. There is a Q&A question. Maybe you can read it.
Changing the human impact on the environment would also be human impact. Is there an alternative to human impact? I think it's a really interesting question, and for me, I don't think it's we shouldn't be looking for alternatives to human impact, because that kind of leads us down to a very dangerous road in terms of because, I mean, you know, we are part of the environment, and, you know, like the exhibition in the Carnegie Museum, you know, explicitly claimed with the title, "We Are Nature." So I think we have to kind of figure out a more, you know, sustainable solutions, and solutions where we can actually cohabit the planet with all the other species, and you know, all people. So I don't think we should be looking for alternatives to human impact, because, I mean, we will always impact the environment no matter what. But it's just a question of, you know, how big the impact is, and how, you know, what are the consequences.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. So a rhetorical question. Yeah. Sorry. But it's a good point.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bergsveinn. we will, you talk about the concept of flagship, the flagship concept for the museum, and you talk about the Carnegie, and you mentioned Nicole Heller, and Nicole is she's the next speaker. So we will move to her. Nicole is, excuse me, Nicole, I have to start your video. Okay, start your, okay. Nicole, I think you have to turn on your, is it okay? No? Yeah, yes, okay. And Nicole, she's Associated Curator of the Anthropocene Studies at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. So, Nicole, you can go on.
Great. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I hope that you can hear me okay. I will assume so. Yes, so this is great to follow my presentation with the other ones that have just gone. I actually, in many ways, the last question that we were talking about, the challenge of embracing, you know, this humanistic discipline, sociocultural science, is really what I want to talk about right now. You know, the Natural History Museum embracing the Anthropocene in its full, the fullness of the concept. So I'm an ecologist by training, and just to give you kind of where I'm coming from. So, oh, next slide. So I work at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and about 2017, 2016, under the leadership of Eric Dorfman, the museum adopted the Anthropocene as a major thematic, hosted the ICOM NATHIST conference there that year in 2017, and also opened the exhibition, We Are Nature, Living in the Anthropocene. I was hired as a first curator shortly after in 2018, and have basically been working with the museum since to really think about how we can integrate this complex discipline and concept into the museum experience, and beginning to build what we're calling a Center for Anthropocene Studies. Because we really feel that this topic is incredibly relevant for the Natural History Museum, and incredibly generative and productive for sort of cross-disciplinary thinking and engagement with publics on really urgent issues. So what I'm going to just talk about a little bit now is kind of thinking about Anthropocene studies and kind of the opportunity and challenge of that. So with the next slide. Yeah, so the Anthropocene, kind of just to look at it big picture, one of the leading thinkers in this area is Dipesh Chakrabarti, who's a historian at University of Chicago. And he really had some foundational work that I think has been part of what's generated so much kind of cross talk among the humanities and sciences in a really important way. And so when he talks about the Anthropocene, he really thinks of it as this, speaks of it as this intersection of Earth history and human world history, right? Sort of a collision of time that's really interesting. And so there's the scientific life. There's kind of two lives that are emerging. It's scientific life, which is this sort of the issue of stratigraphy and global change ecology, and kind of this idea that we as a human species are a planetary geological force. And this proposition, this idea, gives rise to a whole set of moral and political socioeconomic questions about kind of the ethics of this or the problematics of this. Is it okay that we humans are such a large force? Are we imperiling our own survival? What does this mean for sustainability? These really important questions. And I think this is why the natural history museums are so engaged with this, as a way to engage our publics with thinking about, you know, the so-called planetary crisis or climate crisis that we're in. But as there has been this interest from the humanities and engagement with this concept, next slide, it's also causing, feedback, right? There's a reciprocal relationship here among ideas that's happening. And so a whole lot of ideas have emerged from geographers, social scientists, humanists about, well, wait a second, is Anthropos really a collective actor? Is this the right term, the Anthropocene? What about the difference in culpability? We're not all using fossil fuels in the same way, for example. And in the United States right now, we're really facing, the absolute inequity in the way that environmental challenges that are part of the Anthropocene are experienced in the daily lives of people and are magnified by other social and political injustices. So really that we have to reflect back on that in thinking about the scientific story, right? How does the scientific story account for this unevenness in vulnerability and culpability and power among different human actors? Next slide. Rob Nixon, an English professor, I think puts this very well. And so I just read what he has to say in an essay written in a book called Future Remains, a Cabinet of Curiosities for the Anthropocene. So he says, so a crucial challenge facing us is this: how do we tell two large stories that can often seem in tension to each other? A convergent story and a divergent one. First, a collective story about humanity's impacts that will be legible in the Earth's geophysical systems for millennia to come. Second, a much more fractured story that acknowledges dramatic disparities in planet-altering powers. For Anthropocene thinking to retain any credibility, it needs to negotiate the complex dynamic between a shared geomorphic narrative and increasingly unshared resources. We may all be in the Anthropocene, but we're not in it in the same way. Next slide. So really, in my mind, this is Anthropocene studies. And for the Natural History Museum or Science Museum to retain credibility in working with this concept, we have to engage the complex, the constellation of scholarship that is going on in relation to this term. And there's incredibly generative stuff here and very challenging stuff that gets at the roots of our discipline, the disciplines of natural history, and their complicity in colonial practices in the past, and I would argue present in the today as well. And so these are the kinds of things we have to grapple with as a field and really be thinking about in as we've been talking about in who we partner with and the scholarship that and the stories we tell in the museum. So next slide. In this sense, as we think about the Anthropocene, I think it's really aligning with this notion, this campaign and museum movement about museums are not neutral, right? The Anthropocene concept is not neutral. Natural history is not neutral. And so engaging with this, it really is about finding this intersection, right, between these different movements and interests between decolonization, the Anthropocene, sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And I really think one of the productive ways forward is the alignment of these different issues and kind of building communities of practice that are able to think across these issues collectively and really embed that into how we work with this concept in the museum. Next slide. So to me, this is really this many lives of the Anthropocene. So Chakrabarti talks about two lives. I think we could think of it as many lives. And it's really an opportunity and a challenge, right? Because on the opportunity, it means that as scientists or in museum professionals, we have incredible diversity of voices and scholarship and partnerships to draw on who are engaged in this problem of thinking about what is the Anthropocene and how are we going to respond to it as communities and society. The challenge of that is also the same thing, right? It's this many lives and the incredible complex constellation of points of view and scholarship, and much of which can actually challenge central dogma and norms that we take for granted in scientific practice. So So this is really that opportunity and challenge that I've been grappling with in my work and with my colleagues at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Next slide. So one of the things, and I think this kind of addresses what Nicolas was asking, you know, how do a group of scientists, for example, maybe who don't have humanists on staff or don't have experience with this, how do we start to even think about working with these concepts? And so I worked last year with a PhD student in theater as part of a public humanities program in partnership with the University of Pittsburgh's Humanities Center. And she and I kind of were exploring the literature together and thinking about, well, what would a rubric look like that could help an organization or help a group of individuals think strategically about that programming or exhibition work they were doing. And we thought about kind of 3 different areas to think about: approach, depth, and inclusion. And so approach was really sort of this idea of, you know, what are criteria that help an institution or its programming or exhibition address the Anthropocene in holistic, how does the institution define the concept both internally and for its audiences? And to what degree is it using interdisciplinarity, complexity, and interrelationships to do that? Depth, this is thinking about to what degree does the institution really engage the Anthropocene holistically, looking at the personnel involved and its impact on the institutional direction and practices. So thinking about representation, institutional effect, self-reflexivity. And then the third was about inclusion and the degree to which the engagement was looking at the social and political aspects, power, social justice, and equity. And we align these as participation, social justice, solutions, and power. So this is kind of a draft and experimental way of thinking about this. Next step, next slide. And you know, just as a kind of piloting, Shelby used this rubric to look at 3 different exhibitions from science, natural history museums that had to do with the Anthropocene either directly or kind of indirectly, and ranked them. And I think what her results say, or they suggest, is that we have a lot of work to do in this area. This is really an area of growth, I would say, and that the Anthropocene is also helping us get better at this. And it's really very generative. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so just kind of, I'm just really wrapping up here. Again, you know, reflecting on kind of the challenges and some sort of words of advice, perhaps, as your institution may be facing this. Why is this really hard to engage the many lives of the Anthropocene? It's really an incredibly complex topic, and that's at odds with kind of an overarching desire to maybe have simple labels and simple interpretation. And what I've learned, one thing I think we're learning at the Carnegie is that you really need to create time and space for group learning and professional development. This is new stuff. It challenges the fundamental ways in which we do our work. And so you can't just kind of turn it on, right? We have to do work to grow and learn together and make space and time for that, which can be really hard. There are a lot of fixed expectations of what natural history is and environmental storytelling is. And I think it's really a struggle to rethink and broaden these narratives. And again, that kind of speaks to the need for time and space for group learning and professional development to really sort of examine practices from the inside out in meeting our publics. And the other, you know, another challenge is that it really does feel political, and it is, and it raises uncomfortable truths and challenges our dogma and norms. And that's the tension that is really generative and exciting, but also really hard. And I think that to work through that, you know, this working on professional development, group learning, but really also extensive coordination and collaboration that might not be standard practice in your museum, and is a lot of what we're really working on as we move forward in deeply engaging the Anthropocene, is kind of rethinking some of our ways that we collaborate across the science departments and with other departments in our museum. And so, so these are just some kind of shared lessons or ideas. And I think that the point is that we need to engage these many lives, and it's going to be hard, but that's the really generative and exciting thing. And I'm so interested and encouraged seeing the work of others in this presentation and elsewhere. So maybe just the last slide. So yeah, so just to finish up, I'm, wondering, are others thinking about similar challenges? I know people are you working to incorporate this kind of transdisciplinary Anthropocene studies at your museum? Really interested to network with others, to connect in different ways. And so please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for this very interesting talk. There is a question from Julie Shapiro about the kind of generational issue in museum.
Okay. Have I found a generational issue in museum patrons comprehending the change and newness in teaching about the Anthropocene, older people versus younger people? Yes, absolutely. There is resistance. I think I've seen it in different ways. I think that certainly many people have been working in their field of practice for 40, 50 years, right? And the Anthropocene seems a bit bizarre and is uncomfortable. And that is a challenge, no doubt. At the same time, I think the more that we've worked with it, the more comfortable everyone is getting and finding their own way in and their own voice. Also kind of moving it away from just being about the science and the stratigraphy, I think helps open it up as well. In terms of our guests and kind of the newness, yeah, I think that younger people are more interested and more open. They kind of get it more naturally, all the intersectional issues that I'm definitely noticing that. Maybe are more skeptical about kind of some of the standard environmental stories and are ready for a new story than older generations. When I talk, I mean, some of the things we're thinking about in our, when I'm talking about this old environmental story or this kind of environmental narrative, it's really, to me, it's that one of the challenges has been, so I'll say, okay, I work on the Anthropocene, and then people, oh yeah, I know what that is. Okay, so it's about invasive species, it's about protected areas. They kind of have these ideas of what it's about, and it's challenging to get people to think beyond those kind of, shall we say, late 20th century narratives that have been dominating environmental storytelling. And I really think we're at a moment where we have to rethink. Those narratives are not going to help us get where we want to go. They're not accurate, really. They don't reflect contemporary thought. They don't reflect humanistic critique. And they don't necessarily build as big a social movement as I think is possible. And so what I'm really excited about is the Natural History Museum really destabilizing, moving away from those narratives, finding new narratives, working with new partners, diverse partners, to think differently about how we even talk about our relationship with nature, right? How we talk about, yeah, I don't want to use words like human impact because that implies this perpetual dichotomy. What about human participation, human interaction? What are the mutual benefits and positive ways that humans are part of systems? Stewardship, drawing on the knowledge from Indigenous partners, which can work to elevate their voices in our museum and really provide important ways to think about what does healthy relationship of a human with non-humans look like. So
There is one question from Fedra Fong from Taiwan about the okay, it's moving on my screen. The Anthropocene more discussed in Europe or North American than, for example, in Asia. What do you think?
I don't know about that. That's help. You have to help me understand that. You know, I will say that I've been pretty focused on how can we work with it in North America and with our communities. So I know less about its relevance or interest in Asia, personally. But that's an interesting point to think geographically. I see another, sharing 2 projects. Your point of, okay, some projects are being shared. Okay, a couple more. Should I just read these real quick? The Anthropocene is still debated by the stratigraphic community. Are there resistance or conflicts within natural history museums when adopting this new interdisciplinary concept? And maybe that's a good one to talk about at the end. I would say, briefly, yes. Yes, there are, but they're diminishing over time, especially as the working group, the Anthropocene working groups, becomes more strong in their statements. And the last one I see is, how do you make people understand the complex issues of the Anthropocene by an exhibition? I think that's incredibly hard. And I'll just say very quickly, one of the things we've learned from We Are Nature and other ways, with complex topics, facilitation, investing in docents, volunteers, education staff to help facilitate the interactions makes a huge difference in trying to work with these complex topics.
Nicole, you said that the things are changing now in Natural History Museum, and of course we can see more and more natural history museum where this kind of internal conflicts are disappearing. For instance, it was the case in Barcelona, or for instance in Barcelona. 2 examples I know. I just want to point out a key point for me. Everything was, of course, very interesting, Nicole, but the point that Natural History Museum is not neutral. That is very, very interesting, and we have a very debate on that precise point last year in Kyoto. And yeah, I think that's really a key point that we could talk about more and more. And for all people interested in a NATHIST, the working groups, yeah, that's something we could talk more. And of course, the Anthropocene as a way to rethink the relation between science and society is a key point. And it's probably the Anthropocene is a way, a mean to make moving the position from the old museum as a place where we know what are the things to place where we add more discussion about the things, maybe. So that's very interesting. Thank you, Nicole. We have to go on now with Hervé Groscarret. And okay, Hervé, can you unmute your sound and start your video? Okay. Yes.
It's okay.
Are you with us, Hervé?
Yes. Yes.
Hervé is a member of the direction of the Museum of Natural History of Geneva. So you can go, Hervé. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nicolas, and thanks everyone to be here and team to organize this symposium. I have been in charge of exhibition and cultural program, yes, since 5 years ago in Geneva, in the Natural History Museum. I'm a museologist, museographer, and curator. I was trained in neuroscience and science communication at university. What questions me and attracts me is the crossroad of disciplines, the gap junctions, the voids. And since 3 years, I'm trained of coaching. I joined this institution after 12 years at the Musée des Confluences in Lyon, ethnographic and natural history collection. I was seduced now by the new cultural and scientific project, Science and Society, which is now entering its second phase. First, to revitalize its permanent course, regional and exotic fauna. Second, create the new Earth Science Gallery called History of Earth and Life. And first, create 2 new exhibition galleries and define the program policy. Next slide, please. For several years now, the Geneva Museum has been reflecting on the way and the need to deal with the Anthropocene, a notion which is debated at home and elsewhere in the academic, scientific, and cultural world. I will take 2 examples, future programs for my speech. First, the cycle Reconnection, Vibrations in Nature, and second, the future History of Earth and Life Gallery. The Geneva Museum is a very popular museum, what's welcomed more than 300,000 visitors a year. Its collection is the largest in Switzerland. Scientists are organized in research laboratories and by fields. The cultural service that I supervise reflects on the education programs, the live programs, as far as possible in dialogue with the scientists. And I would also say in a distance way for more open, less conventional formats such as artists in residence. At this moment, the Maori artist George Nuku is bringing together a collection of ethnography and natural history in 2,120 fiction about oceans, the majestic oceans of plastic. Another way, experiment as literature and collection, for example, writing workshop with publics and Joël Dicker, the writers. What happened when the public is in the presence of naturalist collection. It was a photographic project, Guide to 2016. Another example, night readings to raise awareness of light pollution, 2018, and boat trips on the lake with artists and scientists. Next slide, please. The cycle Reconnections, Vibrations in Nature, proposed to the public from 2 October this year and for 1 year, develops encounters in 3 natural seats of Greater Geneva in partnership with other political and cultural structures. It seems very important to us to propose actions in nature to go beyond institutional walls. When we do this, we observe that something different happens in the attention of the public, in listening, in sharing. Museums remain for me symbolic places that have their constraints. They are like theater of a certain vision and representation of nature, a certain way of thinking about nature and FIFO culture. Let's not shut ourselves in, let's go out, let's breathe. This is something that is strong in the notion of Anthropocene for me. The dialectic nature cultures, hybridations, nature cultures, or on the contrary, nature of the one hand and culture on the other. In Natural History Museum, there is not a simple matter, and it's a subject of lively discussions in the institutions. Next slide, please. With Tim and François Mucarret, an artist, we are building this fair, which do move during 1 year in different places of Greater Geneva, at the edge of a river, at the foot of a mountain, at the edge of a forest. This is an opportunity, day and night, to feel the links with nature from the outside out through creative and philosophical workshops, projections, discussions with multidisciplinary personality like biologists, town planners, writers, philosophers, anthropologists, sociologists, paleontologists, geologists, etc., permaculture, survival. To explore the nature walks, time for meditation, yoga, time for observing the sky, live performance, and even sleeping in the sphere with the publics, discovering organic products, etc. This is for us the way we have found for a living and direct way of thinking about the Anthropocene. That is to say, to take into account in a more global way the current and future environmental stakes, to express the heuristic power that is linked to this notion. We are open to times of contemplation and spirituality. Furthermore, in December, we are opening a space dedicated to the climate crisis and the collapse of biodiversity, this time offering a third venue at the museum, equipping the public through a documentary and educational approach, actions and exchanges to better understand this crisis in order to better face them. The climate crisis, the collapse of biodiversity, these notions are clearly entered the media field. Next slide, please. And these experiments will hopefully feed into the scenario of the future permanent Earth Science Gallery, whose main vein is the history of light and the Earth. It's necessary today. The objective is to provide material and broaden the viewpoint of visitors to enrich their understanding of the upheavals currently affecting the planet and life on its surface. By abandoning the red thread of geological time as a museographic journey, a quasi-universal handrail in exhibition dealing with long time, her project focuses on the interactions between the evolution of life and that of the Earth, interactions considered independently rather than in parallel to the course of time. The recent concept of Anthropocene, for example, is a compelling case study in this regard. In her project, however, time is a structuring theme. Its representation, accompanied by the presentation of the bush of life and the mechanism at play in the evolution of the Earth system, will be the inevitable introduction to the gallery. Once the visitor is imbued with these notions through attractive devices, he will discover in a second space how these systems are in close interaction. How life was born from the inorganic world. How in return, does the mineral transform itself on contact with the living? How does life evolve with the transformations of the globe? How do humans and certain animals share part of their evolutionary history? How do living things adapt to global changes? Whether they occur over a long period of time or during sudden catastrophes are some of the questions addressed. These themes are no strong links between them, and the visitor will have the opportunity to butterfly through this part of the exhibition. Thank you for your attention. I have done save the next slide, sorry.
Okay,
it was the recreation and interaction remix proposition. It was in the sphere about meditation. It was a sphere in the forest. Okay, and it was the last slide about the future gallery exhibition permanent.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hervé. Is there a new question on the Q&A?
Yes.
I don't think so for the moment. I have one. Do you think that this project of the new gallery could be a way maybe to, it's related to the question of Gilles Oliveira, he asked a few minutes ago, it could be a way to maybe to make the position move within the different people in the team?
Yes, we have an important team of scientists in the museum and some specialized of geology or paleontology. And we discuss a lot about the project of the future gallery. And I think there is something new now. The thematic of Anthropocene is inside the society. And I think the thing it changed. It's not the time is a classic approach of time. And I have tried to explain you that there is two parallel systems to abord the problematic of Earth and life and to cross the link between human and life, evolution, etc. I think it's a good possibility. We worked for 5 years. The new gallery was open in 5 years. So I think we have time to exchange. But the approach is to propose the scientists to writing the first notice about the exhibition. And now at the second time, we discuss with cultural groups and scientists to drawing the museographic scenario now. So it's new. I think there is possibility to change something. For example, they accept not to organize a classic system with diorama or classical vitrines about collection. They accept to make new project for the Natural History Museum in Geneva. Yes. I have answered you? Yeah.
Yeah. It's sure that now we can observe in some high school, I mean, for instance, for engineers, I have the example of the École Polytechnique of Lausanne, where from engineers now they have courses on humanities, and maybe within the teams, a key point that we should, when we have people from different culture, from humanities and from sciences, maybe we have to learn from the other, in fact. That, of course, scientists maybe should make some history of science and philosophy, but on the other side, we have to learn for people coming from the humanities more about science. And maybe that's this kind of double direction also presented earlier that could be so applied within the team. And it is also a good point of the Anthropocene, also making the team inside the museum moving.
Yeah. Yes, I think I had the experience of Lyon in Musée des Confluences. We have organized two teams with different disciplines, and we connect with the public to have exchange about the exhibition. I propose for the Geneva Museum to organize not the same, but perhaps to, at the first phase of writing, to connect with humanity and people, to have exchange, to research about the problematic with them. And me, I'm sensitive about ethnographic possibility and the diversity of culture. When I'm working in the natural history of Lyon before Confluence, there is the department of ethnographic and the department of scientific, for natural scientific. And after time, we have very interesting exchange, and we have, it's growing, the exchange, and now after it was more easy to cross and to propose new way of thinking, new text, etc. I think it's take a time, but at the beginning we have to be, we feel good themselves inside the museum about cultural team and scientist team, because it was new for the Natural History Museum of Geneva to have a cultural team. I have created this team. We have 20 now, people about events or exhibition, and we have to create a good place and dialogue with scientists, I think. I hope it's, I'm sure it will be good. Yeah. Okay,
thank you very much, Hervé. There is no more questions, so I will conclude this session. First, to thank everybody, each speaker for this great session with many thinkings and examples from many museums where the Anthropocene has become a flagship concept. And please go to the conference website, but also I would like to add that you can go to the conference website and look at the posters, because there are in particular 2 posters related to the Anthropocene topic, one from Tokyo and one from Sion, with a project, an educational project funded by the Swiss Foundation. And I must add that the session was recorded and will be available at a later date. And finally, for those who are interested in the Anthropocene working group, please go on your new NATHIST website and you can write an email to the contact address. But also, if you go to the I think it is on the chat. Maybe there is also a link to where you can write down your name and add your address. So and so we will try to give you later more info and on that topic. So thank you